Today, we come to you live from the living room. I am Annika Ashkenter.
And I am Glinda Glimper.
And today, on A Look into the Past, we are going to discuss one of America's past speakers on civil rights. Glinda, can you tell the audience who this is?
Of course, Annika. Everybody, it's, here we go. It is Malcolm X.
Yes, Malcolm X, the well-known civil rights speaker of the 60s. Known for speaking for separation of blacks and whites at a time when most people were speaking for bringing the races together. Today, we are going to delve deeper into his past and discuss the mysteries we discover there. Starting at the beginning, Malcolm X was born at Malcolm Little in Omaha, Nebraska on May 19, 1925. At a young age, he was introduced to the racial tensions of the century. His dad being a preacher and outspoken supporter of black nationalists, the Littles were targets of the Ku Klux Klan. When Malcolm was only 4, the Littles moved to Michigan to escape the multiple threats. However, they soon discovered that they had gone from the frying pan to the fire.
That sounds bad. I don't think that was their goal when they moved.
Probably not. In Michigan, the threats did not decrease, but rather increased. Very soon after moving, their house was set on fire by a group of white men, and the white firefighters simply stood and watched it burn to the ground. Thankfully, none of the 8 Littles were hurt. Going from threats against their homes and well-being, Mr. Little now received death threats, which culminated in his death in 1931 when he was discovered on the trolley tracks. Of course, the police and law officials declared it suicide. Mr. Little was not the only one killed by white men in Malcolm's family. 3 of his 4 uncles were murdered by white men for their actions in civil rights.
I would think this is where Malcolm's civil rights actions would have started, the root of his speaking.
I would think so too. But Malcolm's career as a speaker didn't start until he was 27 after his time in jail. It was his 7 years in prison where Malcolm's well-known lifestyle as a Muslim speaker against white people began. Yes, the famous Malcolm X started in prison. After his dad was killed, his mom couldn't recover from his death and was eventually put into a mental institute. After moving from foster family to foster family and dropping out of school at age 15, Malcolm eventually ended with his older sister in Boston, where he was a shoe shiner. At this point, he became involved in petty crimes, which slowly became bigger until he was coordinating narcotics, prostitution, and gambling rings. Known as Detroit Red due to his red hair, he was eventually caught in 1946 with one of his buddies and put into jail for 7 years.
Wow, from jail to public speaking without a high school education? Malcolm X's story is truly inspiring when you consider his background. But what I, and I'm sure most of the audience, is wondering is this. How did he become such a fluent speaker? And did you say a while ago that he was Muslim?
Excellent points, Linda, and they both happened while he was in jail. While in jail, several of his siblings visited him and told him about their recent conversions to Islam, the Nation of Islam to be exact. Malcolm read many of the writings of this group and decided to also convert. One of the beliefs he was taught was that all white men are evil, and this is why blacks must be separated from them. That is why Malcolm went on to teach that blacks were actually superior. Also while in jail, he continued his education and studied the dictionary for hours to increase his vocabulary, which is how he became a motivational speaker later in life.
That is real dedication. Although in prison, he probably didn't have any other responsibilities.
That's probably true, Linda, but I wouldn't advise this technique of learning for most people, because good crime history probably isn't good on a resume.
Excellent. I remember that. Malcolm X is now on parole. Wait, he isn't Malcolm X yet. At what point did he become Malcolm X and no longer Malcolm Little?
We're just getting to that point, Linda. When Malcolm went on parole in 1952, he joined the Nation of Islam, the NOI, also called the Black Muslims. At this point, he changed his surname, his last name, from Little to X, to signify his lost tribe name from Africa. He quickly moved up in this movement, going on to lead 3 different mosques in his time, and tripling the size of the followers due to his speaking. In the 1960s, racial tensions were increasing, and the FBI infiltrated the now large group to guard the peace.
The FBI infiltrating this group? Racial tensions must have been intense. I mean, those are sort of extreme actions, aren't they?
I suppose they are. But in the leadership of the movement, there was a lot of jealousy of Malcolm X's fame due to his speaking. And there were rumors of him taking over from the leader, Elijah Muhammad. However, I don't personally think Malcolm X ever hoped to do this, as he viewed Elijah with awe and respect. That's why the discovery of 1963 devastated him so much.
What discovery? This is really getting exciting.
Malcolm discovered that Elijah Muhammad was having several secret affairs and had already had several children out of wedlock. These were in direct disobedience with Islamic teachings, and many believe this is why Malcolm X left the NOI in 1963.
Really? I always heard that he had been suspended the year before from speaking after being disrespectful and condescending about JFK's assassination. Elijah Muhammad was furious with him and suspended him from teaching for 90 days. And Malcolm X was so upset that about this, he decided to leave the next year.
I suppose that could be true, too. It also could have been both facts combined. The known fact is that Malcolm definitely left the NOI in 1963. Shortly after, he traveled to several places in Europe and Africa, when he had what he called an awakening and discovered the real meaning of Islam, in the fact that he no longer believed all white men were evil. Back in America, he decided to start his own groups, the Muslim Mosque Incorporated and the Organization of Afro-American Unity. He also changed his name to APUSH al-Shabazz, although for the sake of time and pronunciation, we shall continue to call him Malcolm X on today's show. He then went on to travel around and talk about the policies and goals of his new organizations, such as taking their thoughts and plans to the United Nations for a larger audience.
Well, that sounds like a good plan. But what did the NOI think of Malcolm's new goal and speeches?
They certainly weren't pleased, and the FBI warned Malcolm that he was a real target. He discovered this for himself on February 14, 1965, when the NOI firebombed his house, although not hurting him, his wife Betty, or their 4 daughters. At this point, Malcolm did have bodyguards.
Oh, good. That was my next thought question.
I figured. I had an idea of what you were thinking. Malcolm had bodyguards, but unfortunately, they weren't able to stop everyone. On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X was getting up to speak at a meeting about his new groups when 3 men from the NOI ran on stage and shot him 15 times at close range. When taken to the hospital, he was declared dead.
Wow, that's tragic.
I find this the saddest part. At his funeral, his friends took the shovels from the hired gravediggers and buried his body themselves.
What an incredibly sweet thing for them to do. But what happened to the 3 men?
Well, in 1966, they were convicted of first-degree murder. Oh wow, look at the time, Glinda. We're almost out of time for the end of our show.
This has definitely been one of the most interesting shows we have done yet.
And with that, we thank you for tuning in to this month's show of A Look into the Past. We invite you back when we discuss someone else in history. Stay tuned for when that is.